Test. Okay, it seems to be working. So I guess for the people in the room, that sound was familiar. We have been having many online meetings in the past few years. Fortunately, we are back in real setting. So welcome from Brussels also to the online participants. You are following the live streaming of our event. Thank you very much for your interest. Many thanks also for the people that are here in person. You will have as benefits extended networking sessions in between the two sessions and also at the end also some drinks. So that's an encouragement for the people that are just watching the live streaming, if possible next time to be with us in person. It's of much higher quality, of course, for everybody. I will just kindly ask if somebody in the online can confirm that they hear us well. Just write in the chat, yes, we hear you well, or no, we don't hear you well. Okay, I see some people giving the finger, the right finger, the correct finger. Thumbs up, huh? So without further ado, I'm Andrei Lițiu, coming from Riva, and I'll keep it very short. I'm just giving you the logistics. Those of you that are in person, when you took your badge, you saw there's also a printout of the speaker's bio and also the program. I spammed you, so you have it in your inbox many times already. For those online, I'm sorry, I cannot give you any handout. So you have already the material. I'm sure you've looked through it. So now you'll actually see all these experts that have agreed to come here today with us, exchange on a very important topic that's finally becoming forefront in the context of the EPBD, and that's indoor environmental quality. Let's see, change the slides, voila. So shortly, I'll be passing the floor to our dear colleague from CEREMA, Valérie Leprince. She will be our moderator for session number 1. Then we would have a keynote from Pawel Wargocki, coming from DTU and representing also Riva. Then we are very happy to have with us in the room Garcia Audi from DGNR. He will give us an overview of how IEQ is now included in the revised EPBD and what's upcoming, to the extent he's allowed to share with us, of course, as usual. And this is where my time to pass over to Valérie comes. There will be a moderated panel discussion about which Valérie will tell you more about and will guide you through the rest of session 1. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So I would like to thank Riva for the invitation of being the moderator of this station. Thank you very much. I'm very, very honored to be there. So just first a short icebreaker. What are those numbers represent according to you? Do not try to yell it, I'd say. It's not a phone number. Any idea? Well, that's a number of recitals, articles, and annexes that were in the first EPBD in 2002 and in this third revision now, 2024. So you see that the EPBD has really taken more and more importance over the years, and it has now put back the indoor environment quality back at its place together with the energy performance of building. Well, it does make a lot of sense to put indoor environment quality at the same place as energy performance, because building has always been built for that. You don't build building for energy performance, you build building to provide a good, healthy, and a good environment quality for the people in it. And then you try to make it with as less energy as possible. But since Stone Age, we have been able to make low zero energy buildings. That's not what is difficult here. So now, what we need to know is, what do we need to guarantee a good, healthy, and good well-being in the building? And that's what Pawel will present us today. So Pawel, you can come in here. So Pawel is a professor at the Technical University of Denmark. Is well known for his 25 years of experience on this field, about his research about human requirements and indoor environment. And so you will make your presentation about the overview of environmental quality and its importance.
Well, thank you very much for the organizers for this important event. And I want to disappoint you a little bit because some of you have seen some of that I'm going to present, but I think it's not enough to talk about it because it's still, we need to be talking to basically convince and tell people of the importance of IEQ. I have 15 minutes to talk, and this is a really short time. So I'll be jumping through my presentation, but I hope that afterwards my presentation can be also distributed to you so you can study of this. IEQ is extremely important, and I will explain what the IEQ is. And of course, we are very, very happy that this is in the context of the EPBD that was approved. And then if you go through the EPBD, I think IEQ is mentioned more than 10 times at least. And then this is an important article, Article 13, which talks that member states shall set requirements for the implementation of to maintain a healthy indoor climate in buildings. So this is a very important article. So first of all, why it is important? Well, we talk about this 95% of time spent in buildings. We spend truly very little time outdoors. And then some people can say, okay, let's have people outside, like those semi-outdoor environments. Still, even if we increase outside time to 10%, still we will be like 90%, even if to 15%, 85%. So this is our new habitat. And this new habitat is mainly in our residential environments where we sleep. So if we take an average male of 79 years, the average 79-year-old male will be sleeping 26 years and spending 54 years at home, only about 6 years outside. So you see how important it is. Some people say that we inhale a swimming pool of air every day. We do not realize how much air we inhale. And this air is inhaled actually in our buildings. That can be the air that is actually containing the contaminants that are coming from the building components and from us staying indoors, but also coming from outside. So all of that has to be taken into account. And of course, since we spend so much time indoors, we are also affected by all the other aspects of the indoor environment in buildings. So what is the IEQ? IEQ is indoor environmental quality. Originally, and you will see it on your left, has been considered as a thermal. That has 4 components, major components: a thermal environment, indoor air quality, acoustic environment, and light environment. And I think the extension from indoor air quality and thermal to those 2 aspects of acoustic and light make it very complete and important. We are never exposed to either only temperature, either only pollutants, either only daylight or artificial light, or either only to some acoustic environment. They always are present together in building, and this is why they should be considered together and how they interact. This is an extremely important area which we know very little about. And then I think we should extend our definition of indoor environmental quality to include 2 other aspects. Because we are separated from environment, the biophilic and contact with nature, very nice term, biophilic design is extremely important for this point of view. Not thinking about that plants will remove, for example, pollutants. They may remove pollutants, but it's the contact with the nature is the most important here. And also we have to remember that we can make decisions. Sometimes we can make decisions, much better decisions than the control system. So human behavior also should be considered in this entire aspects of indoor environmental quality. So in order to create a sustainable building and sustainable progress, we have to consider humans in buildings, and build not only buildings and energy should be considered, but also humans in buildings. So green and healthy buildings are smart buildings, not only green buildings, but have to be healthy for the. So of course, the aspect of energy is important and we should never forget it, but we should add on top the buildings that must ensure conditions to not create the risk for health. And this is a definition of healthy buildings, that healthy buildings should not compromise the basic human requirements. So now people ask me, okay, this is very nice, this is a theory. Do we have evidence that indoor environmental quality is important? So we have plenty of evidence. We don't have to start redeveloping the wheel. We should take, with the evidence that we have today, we can easily design the building which keeps the people healthy in buildings. There has to be a decision made, because we know thermal is affecting comfort, well-being, acoustic, the same, air quality, and light. We know that all of them, they will affect sleep, our mood, some more health. All of them will affect how we perform, how we do our work, and how we learn. That information is at hand that can be used and actually implemented in buildings with the solutions and decisions. But that requires a framework, the policy, and all the other aspects that we hopefully will be discussing during our panel. And then, but specifically, we should look at the aspect of learning and work performance, where we see that the effects are small, but tangible. So we are talking about the effects of reduced performance, reduced learning, increased absence rate. The most important thing I remember, 26 years we sleep, is that the new data, brand new data suggests that our sleep is disturbed, and our sleep is important for our health if the quality of indoor environment is poor in our bedrooms. And the effects are similar across different regions. So it is not that, okay, that we can demonstrate in one study, then in another study, that there is an effect of thermal environment on work performance. There is an effect of ventilation or air quality on work performance. It is across different climates and different regions. We see the same effects of the temperature increase in tropical climates, in temperate climates, the same effects of air quality. So these are repeatable effects that have been demonstrated, so they are very strong. But still, we have that evidence. IEQ is not satisfactory. This is probably an example of the study, 3 studies that were done in European buildings in 96, in early 2000, in 2010 up. And they show that the prevalence of complaints of the occupants because of a poor indoor environmental quality is more or less stable, not change. For some increase, for some decrease, but generally not dramatic change, even though we have that evidence. Why? We hope to discuss this during panel, but I think one of the reasons is our requirements. We did not put the bar very high up. So the standards are for minimum standards and so on and so on, and then that is limiting our innovation. We actually design environment for a non-existing average person. So like every one of us wore the shoe of, let's say, 7. So this is basically what is happening with us. And then I think this is one of the reasons why we don't have that. There is other reasons as well that we should be discussing. And some people are saying, okay, it's not a big deal. People can handle that. People will not die of a little bit of odor, a little bit of overheating. So it's pushed, always pushed back, because there are more important things. But should it be pushed back? I think it shouldn't. Many people put this argument in front. IEQ is very costly. If we want to implement all of that in buildings, it will cost a fortune. It is impossible to do it. And basically we'll go bankrupt. Is it true? Well, of course, everything costs something, and nothing is free in this world. But if we start to calculate what are the benefits of implementing high indoor environmental quality, then suddenly everything is cheap, because the modest gains in work performance can deliver significant financial benefits. Because in buildings, the costs are people. Energy is a cost, and the rental is a cost, is important cost that should be considered, but mainly these are people. So if we want to have growing economy or a strong economy, we should be thinking about people who will lose on productivity because the environmental quality is poor, and then payback times are very, very short. We are talking about a payback times of about 2 years, less than 2 years. In most cases, less than 1 year. Show me any other investment that will give you the payback time so quickly. And there are some crude estimates, too short sleeping, you know, this loss of about up to 6 working days a year. That's a lot, but sure. And then there are also costs for health. These are major. So if we disregard the productivity and say, well, let's talk about health, we are talking about more than 2 million healthy life years lost. It's about 200 billion annually. So if we only look about air quality, this is huge. And if we were prepared for COVID in Denmark, we would be saving 30,000 healthy life years. Globally, 1 trillion per month euro we will be saving if we were prepared for that. So in fact, IEQ is a low-hanging fruit. It's like an energy. It's the same thing, but we have to look at it in this way. So what is the way forward? There is a lot of ways how we can advance that. But I think now we have a big new challenge. It is a challenge is not only climate change, but also resilience of buildings into the climate change. So we have to have first of all, thinking about the resilience in building design and operation, and implement those elements that are related to indoor environmental quality into it. The second one is human-centric design. So today we probably are more like building-centric design or population-centric design, not a human-centric design. Every one of us is different. So we need to address, the flexibility, preferences, and then we need, at some time of the day, we need conditions that promote comfort, all the time health, of course, sometimes sleep and so on. So all of that has to be flexible, more flexibility, more understanding of our needs as humans. And I think one of the problems is also the monitoring. It's a sort of a huge issue, because how to document that indoor environmental quality is good or bad, and we have to develop a solution for monitoring. And we don't have those solutions, and those solutions are important not only because of documentation, but also to demonstrate invisible. I mean, I know there is well lit here, there is no noise, and the thermal probably is fine, but I don't know whether there are toxic pollutants here. Do we know that? We don't know. So we need to have a metric or rating schemes that will tell us, and that will help us and support the proper management of the buildings. And what is most important is raising awareness. People come to a building and you go to the supermarket, you read what is on the label, right? Product. But you don't go to a building and see what is on the label for the building. And I think this is an extremely important point that needs to be brought. So there are some proposed solutions, and I would like to mention 2 that were developed in Denmark, which is an asset rating compass, IEQ compass, TAIL, which is a performance rating, but also at the European Commission, there is a levels. It's a framework for sustainable buildings, which contains the element of indoor environmental quality. And this is a very good development. Although light and acoustic is not considered in the first version, but they are considered to be included later. So there are attempts, but we don't have a sort of agreement on how to do it in the future. We probably will in the future have also health performance indicators. Medical aspects are developing very quickly. Whether that will be a part of that equation or that framework, we really don't know, but I think there is an opportunity also there. There we have to work with the medical professions, and also not only medical professions, but also other professions to understand that better. So it is a high time for change today. And then because we have the EPBD, new EPBD, we have that evidence. So we really need to have some frameworks to support that. And one important thing that I would like to bring in is that often when we talk about indoor environmental quality, we talk about, oh, it's bad, and we reduce the number of dissatisfied, or reduce the loss of productivity, reduce the loss on sleep, or something like that. I think that what we have to have is in our language is change the language to talk about positive, what indoor environmental quality can bring as a positive. So create positive sensation. It can fulfill preferences. It can enhance health and our resilience to diseases. I'm finishing. This is the last one. So I think what we do about indoor environmental quality, and could be also a problem, is we are doing sort of a pathogenesis, and we should be doing the salutogenesis, where we just talk about the buildings that promote our health, and not only about the risks for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pavel, and thank you very much for keeping track of time. That was perfect timing. Thank you. Now, second speaker will be Garcia, Audi. I'm very honored to welcome him. For the last 14 years, he has been working in different positions within the European Commission. And since January 2018, he has been working as a policy officer within DG Energy, mostly dealing with the EPBD. So we talk about the inclusion of indoor environment quality in his EPBD version. So he's currently team leader for national renovation policies, funding, and international cooperation on building policy. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Perfect. Yeah, you can hear me now, I guess. Well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for inviting us to be here today. And with that, I also have to apologize for my head of unit, Stefan Mozerk, who originally was invited to come here, but he couldn't make it in the end. So he sent me instead. I hope I can make up for the difference. Thank you also for inviting us to this specific room, because I can actually see the installations, which is always interesting. Yeah, sorry, I keep looking at it all the time. I'm a little bit puzzled about the orientation of the ventilation, but okay, that's a discussion for another day. Right, so the energy performance of buildings directive. So why did we do a recast, and why do we need to address the building sector? I'm sure it's not a surprise to anybody if I repeat the figures on 40% of energy consumption comes from buildings. It's our biggest energy consumer and our biggest CO2 emissions producer at the level of Europe. So if at some point we want to address the challenge of energy independence and the challenge of achieving a decarbonized Europe, at some point we have to go through buildings. There is no other way around it. Also, something that is not on the slide, but that was very much in our minds when we were preparing the impact assessment and the legislative proposals, and then during the negotiations, is the state of the indoor environmental quality. A lot of the studies that we have looked at suggest that yes, the ventilation rates, the conditions, once the building is constructed or renovated, are generally okay, but they tend to degrade over time, which is one of the reasons why we very much concentrated on the aspect of monitoring and control of indoor environmental quality over time. More on that later. I will try to go through the different provisions. Then, before going into the individual provisions, one thing I would like to underline is the EPBD is part of a larger set of legislation. It's specifically part of the Fit for 55 package. And there, it's very important to consider the fact that it's an integrated part of the package. We cannot fully extract the EPBD. It depends on legislation, on provisions in other legislations, and other legislations very much depend on the EPBD in order to actually deliver the energy savings. So, for example, the EED mechanisms for energy savings, a lot of the time result in measures in buildings. Those measures in buildings, they have to comply with the EPBD, with the minimum energy performance requirements. So the EPBD has an effect and delivers the savings and helps deliver the savings from other directives. So it's all part of an integrated package. And on this, it's part of an integrated package from a long time ago. It's not just the Fit for 55 package. Indeed, the EED and the RES directive are already mentioned here too. But bear in mind also, the EPBD is very much integrated with other initiatives like eco-design and energy labeling. It's very much integrated with levels. And it's even integrated with things like state aid and the EU green taxonomy. So it goes well beyond the scope of the simple Fit for 55 package or even the EPBD on its own. And very much in relation to these, don't worry, I'm not going to go through all the different provisions, but it's very important to underline the fact that there is a number of articles and a number of provisions on the EED. Thank you for the counting on the recitals and the annexes. It is an impressive growth over time. I've done a similar analysis. But all of these individual elements should not be looked at individual level. All the provisions are very much interlinked with one another. So cost optimum methodology, for example, has an effect on minimum energy performance requirements. Then at the same time, for example, if somebody carries out a renovation because there is an obligation for minimum energy performance standards, that renovation has to be done according to the minimum energy performance requirements. At the same time, the calculation methodology has an effect on the EPCs and has an effect on the provision of information to citizens. So all the different pieces of all the different provisions within the EPBD are very much related to one another. You should not read them on a one-by-one basis. It's part of a package. So now I'll go through the main provisions of the EPBD, and I will try to highlight where I think there is a relevant link for environmental quality and what's relevant about that. The first one is MEPS and trajectory. So MEPS for non-residential buildings and trajectory for the residential building stock. That was, as you can imagine, one of the most difficult parts of the negotiations and of the EPBD. The first part of it, it's the non-residential sector. There, member states will need to ensure that the 16% worst performing buildings in the non-residential sector are renovated and they improve their performance. And then on the residential sector, it's a completely different approach. Instead of a direct obligation on the 16 worst performing buildings, it's not like that at all. Instead, member states, they need to ensure that the energy performance of the residential building stock is improved by at least 16%. How they achieve that is completely up to them. They can rely on information campaigns, subsidies, fiscal schemes, or even direct obligations if they choose to do so. It's completely up to them to decide how to achieve these energy savings. The important element, though, is that all of these is basically a trigger for renovation, and renovation can be a big element to take into consideration when improving the energy, not just the energy performance of the building, of course, but also the environmental quality. To put it as an example, not long ago, we were negotiating a scheme for supporting renovations in vulnerable households in a member state. I'm not going to say which one of them. But it's in a very poor area, and they wanted to focus on improving the windows and the facade. That's all very good, but in that area, people still use a lot of indoor solid fuel heat generators, so basically coal burners within the building. You can imagine that if we improve the facade or if we improve the windows, we're reducing the infiltration rate, and that could cause a very significant problem in terms of environmental quality. So we need to make sure that even when there is a renovation of a building, that takes in consideration the environmental quality. And these are elements that we need to pay attention to. Then we have zero emission buildings. That's the new standard for construction for new buildings, starting from 2028 for public buildings and 2030 for all new buildings. It's a bit of a tricky definition in a way. There are some elements that are very clear, some of them that are not so clear. The one that is very, very clear is the zero on-site emissions from fossil fuels. So a zero emission building cannot have fossil fuel emissions on site. Then it has to have a very low amount of energy consumption with a view to achieve a cost optimal level. Put a pin on that for a moment, but it needs to have a very, very high energy performance. And then the remaining amount of energy needs to be supplied from a number of energy sources. And that's where things get a little bit complicated. Nevertheless, I mentioned put a pin on the cost optimal level. That's very important. It's not indicated on the slides, and it's something that it's quite easily missed, but there is a change in the cost optimal methodology. We now need to start taking in consideration what we call the externalities to energy efficiency. And that includes, for example, the aspect of health. So when member states do the cost optimal calculations, just very quickly by a show of hands, do you know what the cost optimal methodology is? Okay, a few. So basically, the cost optimal methodology is the tool that we use in order to define minimum energy performance requirements. So when member states set the requirement to say these windows have to be a U value of 1.2, or this heat generator has to have a COP of 4.5, or whatever requirements that they set. When they say this building has to achieve this many kilowatt hours per square meter, they have to use the cost optimal methodology. And this methodology takes into consideration the energy performance of the building, the cost of installations, and the cost of maintenance of the buildings over 20-25 years, depending on the building category. From now on, apart from the cost of operations, they also need to start taking into consideration the health and well-being aspects. So that allows member states, for example, to account for the benefits of having higher or lower indoor environmental quality. So that's pretty important in terms of how we consider this element, and we are starting to give member states the tools to take this into consideration when they set basically the building codes that have to go into force. I hope that was clear. In addition to that, there is also requirements on the global warming potential of the building, so the embedded energy. And there are also direct requirements in terms of environmental quality. We need member states to install monitoring and control devices on new non-residential buildings, and to define what kind of levels do these buildings have to achieve. Very, very quickly, this is perhaps one that does not have a big impact in terms of environmental quality, but still it's one of the most relevant ones. It's the phase out of fossil fuels and the phase in of solar energy in buildings. In terms of phase out, there is a clear requirement for member states to phase out completely the use of subsidies for the installation of fossil fuel boilers starting from the 1st of January 2025. So that's just around the corner. And then member states, they also have to put up in place measures and policies in order to achieve a phase out of fossil fuel use in buildings by 2040. Important here, with a view to, it's not a hard obligation. It's not that member states have to achieve these the objective by 2040, but they have to put policies in measures that are proportional, and they should lead to the achievement of these objectives. And at the same time that we phase out fossil fuels, we phase in solar energy, and this is basically about the introduction, the gradual and proportional introduction of solar installations in buildings, both for new and existing buildings. Then, while I was revising the slides before we started, I realized I made a mistake. So I'll start by saying that the definition of indoor environmental quality does not replace the long-term renovation strategies. That's a mistake on my side. Apologies for that. So the important bit is we now have a definition of indoor air quality. It's included in Article 1. And perhaps even more important, there is a direct reference to the fact that buildings have to maintain indoor environmental quality in Article 1. And I cannot underestimate how important that is. That really gives us the foothold to make sure that buildings comply with this type of requirements, that we take this into consideration. And also, for example, that even when there is subsidies for the renovation of a building, any cost associated to the improvement of environmental quality can also be taken into consideration because it's in the EPBD. Other particular elements in terms of environmental quality, it needs to be addressed both in new and renovated buildings. Member states have to set up the requirements for the implementation of adequate environmental quality in buildings. So they have to define what is considered a good environmental quality, what indicators they will have to put in place in order to make sure that engineers and architects they can make sure that they get them they make it right on the buildings. In order to maintain these over time, there is also a requirement to have measuring and control devices. So it's not just at the time of constructions; it's also during the lifetime of the building. And last but not least, improvements to the building. So the recommendations that we usually do on energy performance certificates or inspections or the building renovation passports, they also need to take into account the environmental quality, and they can provide recommendations to improve these. And now, very, very quickly, just the last provisions. There is an upgrade to the national building renovation plans. These ones do replace the long-term renovation strategies. I hope that's clear. They are much better aligned with the national energy and climate plans, which is quite important from our perspective. There is also a huge strengthening of the provisions on sustainable mobility, because we see that the electric vehicle is the uptake of electric vehicles is going much faster than initially expected. So we need to make sure that we have the necessary infrastructure in buildings and that we can facilitate the installation of this infrastructure in the future. So we strengthen those requirements. Then we have what we call information tools. Here we have the energy performance certificate, the building renovation passport, and the smart readiness indicator. We basically strengthen all of them, particularly in the element of quality, but also making them much more understandable. For example, with a common A to G classification scheme across the EU. And all of them have indicators on environmental quality. So we take these elements into consideration. And last but not least, we defined the requirement to have national databases, which also contain information about those indicators that I've mentioned. And then, very quickly, we've got also a number of provisions on finance. The key element of these is that we need to focus as much as possible the public finance because it's limited. So we need to make sure that it goes into those that need it the most, so socially vulnerable people, but also those that want to carry out very deep renovations. So it's very much, these provisions are focusing on how can we make sure that the finance goes where it needs to go. Then, in terms of the timeline of the recast of the EPBD, it was officially published after almost 3 years of negotiations and discussions. It was officially published on the 8th of May. That means it entered into force on the 28th of May, 2024. And the transposition date is 29th of May 2026. So member states have 718 days left to transpose the EPBD. Not a lot of time left. So what we are doing from the Commission side to support member states in this process is we are preparing a number of guidance and recommendations documents. I guess this is relevant for you. So we want to provide information to member states on how can they do this transposition, how we think that the provisions should be interpreted, and that should help them deliver a much more coherent, especially at the EU level, so not everybody doing completely different things, going for as common approach as possible. Where we are with this, we've started the discussions with member states, and we will finish the draft of the document. So the internal drafting, we will finish it by the end of the year, because then it has to go through a whole approval process, and that takes several months. So we will publish it sometime in May, June next year. Why did I mention the draft deadline by the end of the year? Because if you want to send us any comments, any suggestions, any position papers that you may have, or if you want to discuss any of these articles, the moment is now. The longer we take to bring discussions to member states, the more difficult it is to introduce those elements in the discussion. So anytime between now and September, October, it's a good moment. Beyond that, it's going to be very difficult to introduce anything new in the guidance. In the past, we have relied a lot on stakeholders for best practice, for providing us with technical advice or pointing out where you think things could be done better or where you think things could be strengthened. So if you have any comments or suggestions, please do so. In general, we prefer to work through stakeholders because it makes the life easier for us, meeting one person that represents multiple, but we can accommodate wherever it's needed. And last but not least, we also have 8 delegated acts, but that will start, the work on all the delegated acts identified in the EPBD will start more in September. So that's it from my side. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll stay here for, I think there's a panel afterwards, and if there are any questions afterwards, I'll be at the networking event too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pawel. So we move now to the panelist discussion. So I would like first to welcome, so let's start with Loïc Delorme. Yeah, so Loïc works as a government affair manager, Schneider Electric. So you can, yeah, introduce yourself.
Perfect, thank you. So as I mentioned, Loïc Delorme, I work for Schneider Electric, but I'm here on behalf of eu.bac. And I think this past mandate has seen like it's a bit of a trope to say it, a polycrisis. We saw COVID, which I think taught us for the wider public the importance of indoor environmental quality. And then we saw a war in Ukraine that caused an energy price crisis, which taught us the importance of energy efficiency. And I think part of that is why I think we've gotten such a good outcomes for the Energy Performance Buildings Directive, and why it includes so many provisions for energy efficiency and for indoor environmental quality, and the meeting point between those And so, as Pau mentioned, there will be a requirement from May 2026 onwards that there is a requirement for BACs to continuously monitor indoor environmental quality factors such as temperature, humidity, CO2 concentration, lighting levels, and I expect that there will probably be more detail and perhaps wider scope included in some of the guidelines. And so the BACs industry fully supports this shift. It's for occupant health, for well-being, for productivity, and we're sort of looking now to the sort of next steps, proactive implementation. So I think the message that we would bring to the policymakers that are in the room, to industry representatives, be it from companies, from associations, that right now we need to be proactive on implementation. And a lot of that is going to go through guidelines. So we've already well advanced in our work for publishing our guidelines, and those we could turn into checklists, which are used on the ground by building, by architects, by builders, by engineers, technicians, and consumers, building managers as well. And one sort of example of how the work that we do really does have an impact on the ground. I have a relative who asked for help understanding the energy performance certificate of a new home that they were looking at. And on it, there was a line that said, self-regulating radiator certified by eu.bac. And I am a member of eu.bac. I'm the vice chair of the advocacy working group, and I had no idea what that meant. And so I talked with Goods, and we looked back through the archives, and in 2017, there was an event very similar to this. It was in Strasbourg at the time, in which eu.bac spoke on the importance of self-regulating devices, in particular for radiators, and saying that consumers were losing 12 billion euro per year because of mechanical valves on radiators. And in 2017 is right before the 2018 EPBD, and the guidances included measures on those, and that cascaded into guidelines, into checklists, and that meant the manufacturers had, like the architects, builders, were looking at these checklists and asking, what does this mean? What does this mean? And manufacturers went to eu.bac, had their product certified as matching, as ticking that box on the checklist, and because of the amazing power of the checklists on the ground, new buildings now have that trivial addition, costs very small amount of money, that every year it will save a small amount of money, but it will keep temperatures at constant levels, regardless of the temperature of the water within the radiator. And it just like there are people who, like politicians, their job is to make noticeable improvements in people's lives every day. Our job, frankly, is making invisible improvements to people's lives every day that sometimes will not take impact for many years. If we are doing our job well, no one will notice, no one will pay attention, because nobody thinks about the ventilation or the heating system unless it isn't working. So I really look forward to this session, to how we can help proactively, invisibly improve people's lives. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So our next panelist will be Jelle Laverge, who is professor at Gent University and a lot of other things also, but I will leave it to yourself to introduce you.
Okay, so hi, I'm Jelle. I'm, as Valérie said, I'm a professor at Gent University here in Belgium, and I'm representing EVIA here today. I want to focus on something that has already been introduced by Pawel and Pau. We have a huge challenge in front of us. We need to, especially with the renovation wave, go through upgrading of a very huge amount of buildings. And one of the particular difficulties with that challenge is that every building is different. We're in a very particular building today. Building next door is very different from this one, and every space within that those buildings can be very different. Also, the outdoor and environmental parameters around those buildings can be very different. And the behavior that was already mentioned by Pawel and the preferences of the people in each of those buildings, in each of those spaces within those buildings can be very different. Especially when you look at indoor air quality, we have many hundreds of different pollutants that have been identified. Many dozens of those that are potential priority pollutants or that we need to be concerned about. And to address all of those, there are many different solutions and requirements that we can put forward. And on those requirements, which is the main task ahead of us, that we need to set those requirements, I think there's two important things to keep in mind. First of all, because all of this diversity that I just described, we will need to, we cannot rely on one-size-fits-all solutions. We need to make sure that we stimulate all of the innovation that we can. And I think the best way to do that is to formulate those requirements in form of performance-based requirements. This little cartoon illustrates that. If you prescribe what kind of solution you want to meet a certain target, if you want to go to the airport, you can tell the taxi driver exactly how to drive, and that will eventually, hopefully, get you to the airport unless something goes wrong. You can also just say, take me to the airport and leave it to the specialist, in this case, the cab driver, to pick for you the best solution. And I think this is really crucial when we want to move forward in the quite ambitious timeline that we have in front of us. Second part is that, again, because of all of this diversity, I think it would be a mistake to choose for a one-size-fits-all solution also in terms of the requirements that we set, because different outdoor climate, different outdoor environment will require a different solution and a different focus on what to address first. And so I think that we need to hierarchize, and I think I can already give you a little sneak peek on what Valérie is going to say in the next session. We need to formulate our requirements in such a way that we agree on the high-level objectives, that we're clear on what it is that we want to achieve, but then leave room for the specific local context to choose the requirements and the criteria to check that those requirements on a local level, and provide, instead of fixed requirements across all of Europe, a framework that allows every country, every local government to set the requirements that are best adapted to achieve those high-level objectives in their local framework. And for that, we're working on updating some of the EN standards that are currently in place regarding IEQ. And with that,
thank you very much, Jelle. Third panelist is Elena Scaroni. Got it. She is the Lighting Europe Secretary General, and I will leave you to introduce yourself.
Thanks a lot, Valérie. First of all, I would like really to say that Lighting Europe is extremely satisfied with how the EPBD went. And I would like to make a pat, you can do it yourself, pat on your shoulder, to the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council, and all stakeholders of the EPBD for this very, very good result. So from the introduction of the Smart Readiness Indicator to the introduction of the well-being in buildings, this is massive, really an important outcome and achievement for the coming years indeed. Why IEQ is so important? This has been perfectly already explained by Professor Wargocki. And I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. I'm already excusing myself in advance, so I can go on now. And then I would really like to say now why lighting is part of the IEQ. Well, lighting is fundamental. It's fundamental for our life in a building, of course, also outside a building. But let's think about inside a building. I would like to propose you a very quick and simple experiment. You now just close your eyes, all of you, please. And this is your life without light. What do you see? What do you see? Nothing. This is just to explain that light enables sight. It's as fundamental as that. Then let's close your eyes just another second. And now think about, you have to stand up and walk down some stairs, something you do probably several times during your days. And how would you feel doing that without light? Do you feel safe? Of course not. So light enables safety. And now think about, just close your eyes again, and you have now to leave the room because the conference is over, or maybe because there is something happening inside. There is maybe something dangerous, so you maybe want to reach quickly the exit. How would you feel doing that without light? How do you feel that? Stressful, indeed. So light enables orientation. So it's as crucial and fundamental as that. That's why it should never be forgotten. But the coolest part of the story is that lighting doesn't do only that. Lighting is also fundamental for our body, as an effect on our body and on our mood. Professor Wargocki said it very, very well before. And I will definitely go deep into that in the next opportunities of our panel discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Oh, you can sit down here. Just don't run away. And oops, sorry. So our last panelist will be Adam Taylor, which is indoor equality chairperson. Sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm Adam Taylor here today with GCP Europe, who represent contractors, installers, plumbers, the companies actually delivering the buildings that we work and live in. So I've been involved in air quality and ventilation for about 20 years and thermal comfort, and I spend my days assessing, remediating and maintaining buildings and the air quality within those. I've also been involved in the development of commercial healthy building standards, namely air-rated and fit well. And I'm glad that I'm not alone in regularly having this conversation that buildings are built for people, not just for saving energy. So hopefully today I can bring to the discussion the realities of these buildings once they've been built and they're in operation, the challenges we face in delivering good indoor environmental quality.
Thank you very much. And so I would like to ask Pawel and Paul to join the panelist for the session. Yeah, this one. Okay. So I would like to start with you, Paul. Maybe you talk about because I mean this is a starting point, the EPBD directive. So let's maybe start with that. We see that indoor environment quality is now in Article 1 of the directive. Why is it that important that it appears from the very beginning, and what does it change? Does it change anything in the end in how it should be dealt with compared to previous version?
Yeah, I mean it's on the title, so to speak. So it's a bit what several people here have said before. We need to make sure that buildings are fit for people, fit for living and use them, work in them, recognize that there are benefits. As soon as we have very good environmental quality, not just the health aspect, but also productivity. Having it in Article 1 allows us to make sure that the energy performance of the building takes these into consideration, or rather, when setting up the requirements for energy performance, we need to maintain the necessary levels of environmental quality. And now that's absolutely crystal clear. Because that's absolutely crystal clear in Article 1, we can then fit it everywhere else in the EPBD and make sure that it responds as it needs.
Okay, thank you. And then the question that comes is, how much does it cost? So is it possible to have energy saving and indoor environment quality going together? So I'm asking maybe you, Loïc, Pawel, whoever want to answer first to that, but can that work hand in hand?
Quite often, when we're looking at the design of buildings with consultants, energy is at the moment definitely the main priority, but the extra effort that you need to go to deliver good, certainly indoor air quality, that's my area of expertise. It's not a huge difference. If you think about it at the beginning of the design, if you're not changing a massive amount of the building. In terms of increasing ventilation rates, there are, certainly from the CO2 point of view, the outdoor CO2 is 400 ppm, so there are diminishing returns from continually trying to dilute with that level. So as long as you're keeping ventilation rates relatively sensible, increasing the rate of filtration, as long as you change the specification of the filter at the same time, it doesn't have to use a lot more energy, but you have to think about it at the beginning and probably use a quality product rather than whatever the cheapest access is.
So like energy performance, indoor environment quality need to be things from the very beginning.
Very beginning.
You want to add something, like?
Yeah, I think so. Completely agree that definitely IEQ and energy efficiency can go together. Sometimes there's a tension between them. So for example, what helps one might not help the other. Classic example of that is over fabric, too much insulation that is creating smaller smaller windows, smaller access for air. But in the flip side, the same intervention in a place where warmth is more important would help IEQ. And I think when it comes to sort of that return on investment, looking purely for a second at the energy aspect, and a lot of our solutions are rather low upfront cost and have and as a result have quite good return on investment. So there's a bit less juice to squeeze out of newer buildings, those that have been built in the last 10 years. But if you're looking at non-residential buildings that haven't been built in the last 10 years, return on investment is very, very low. We calculated for most non-residential buildings, it's 2 to 5 years, depending on the type of building. And I think what's really interesting is how it varies by country and by type. So for example, most hospitals are the fastest because they're so energy intensive. So they return investment in 2 years. However, on the other end of the scale, schools, very large buildings that typically don't care as much about the well-being of their inhabitants, or obsessing their inhabitants, are less well conditioned to complain. So they often have return investments for a whole 6 years, which is still quite low, comparatively speaking. And so definitely there is definitely the two do go together, and return on investment is not something.
I think, Jelle, you want to add something on global cost, probably.
Yes. I was very happy that during the introduction talk we already heard about externalities, because that I think is very important. To add on what you just said, often we talk about the cost of good indoor air quality. One important externality related to bad indoor air or IEQ in general is health. And as you just said, the health sector is one of the most energy intensive sectors that we have. So even if you take only into account the impact energy of the health implications that we can avoid, we have an even much higher return than
I'm getting a bit ahead of myself with some later questions, but there was the NHS, the British UK National Health Service, did a calculation, and they calculated that if they could pay for the renovation of people before they came into the hospital, renovation of their homes, it would be cheaper for the health system than paying for the care costs of those people down the line. And that is just like we're only a few years out from the first death certificate in the UK having cause of death, asthma due to poor air quality in their home.
I would be glad to see this study if you can share it. Thank you. I would like to talk also about indoor environment quality metrics, because I think you started to talk about it, Jelle, Pawel also. The problem is the indoor environment quality metrics need to be in some way harmonized at European level, but in another way, as you said, it needs to be custom to occupants' needs. I mean, South Italian people doesn't have the same needs as Danish people usually, and well, not the same habits, also not the same kind of building, not the same climates. So how can we combine this customized need for indoor environment quality indicators and the need to have something quite harmonized in Europe? You don't want to speak, right, Pawel? No?
You can start if you want.
Okay. Well, I already alluded to it in my introduction words that I think the key to that is discriminating between different levels of how to requirements. And I think we should all harmonize and agree on some high-level objectives, like minimize health impact, avoid damage to buildings, keep productivity and acceptance at an acceptable level, things like that. And then how you translate that into specific, measurable, enforceable criteria that should be more tailored to the specific situation. And for that, we should provide a framework that allows any decision makers, government, building owners, and so forth to go through that process of translating those high-level requirements into adequate and specific requirements for their.
You want to add something, Pawel?
I just want to add one thing is that I think today most of our standards are based on comfort. And this is a major limitation here because comfort can be, different requirements for different people. And if you go to the supermarket or the shop with clothing, you will have different types of clothing, different preferences with different types of clothing. But I mean, in terms of health, requirements will be very similar for many people, and specifically, especially for people who have already are predisposed for some problems. So if these are used as for the definition of our requirements in buildings, that would be a major step towards sort of like finding out similarities between different countries. And of course, there will be differences between Italians and Danes with requirements to comfort, but with requirements to health, probably less.
Great, I may. Sorry to get a little bit legal on this now, but one of the things is the EPBD is a directive, it's not a regulation, so we cannot force member states to use specific indicators. We only ask member states, and you define your indicators, and then make sure that your systems comply with these indicators. However, one thing that I think is quite relevant is not many member states that I know of have requirements at the level of indoor environmental quality. There are many requirements at the level of ventilation. So these many liters a second, these many liters per hour, whatever 8 changes per hour, doesn't matter. But not that many on indoor environmental quality. If we manage to put something on the recommendations, sorry, man, and I'm making publicity for my own stuff. But if we manage to put something on the recommendations, some key principles, some key indicators that say, look, if you get these 3, 4, 5 elements right, you will be able to achieve the adequate performance. Those are the ones you should look into. Then we can guide member states toward. We cannot force them, but at least we can show them the way. And also, it makes it a lot easier for them if they don't have to do the work.
Exactly, and I think there is really a need for European standardization to be able to develop those standards that would then guide the European member country in making those indicators. That's what we are trying to do in EN 1679-1 to actually provide a framework for European country to develop their indicator and create performance-based regulation and not only prescriptive-based regulation. So.
I think what you are saying is very important because now the stakeholder groups should go home and discuss the input to the guideline. And not to give the list of 20 parameters, it's just to give the most relevant 1 or 2 parameters for each domain that should be addressed. And then this is the way how it can start. Of course, we would like to have many more parameters, but we should start at a certain level. We can always add other parameters later on. So I think this is very important. We didn't know that this opportunity, and light and noise can be added there. People that are dealing with the quality can add their part, and then people who are doing thermal environment. I think I don't know who is representing here biophilic designs, probably all of us are, and then also this control aspect for the opportunity for people to take, how to say, action when they need. And of course, this action can respond to their comfort preference. Because, you know, the health should be always there, right? Provided.
Thank you, Pawel. Is there someone want to add something about this question of indoor environment quality metrics? I would like to talk also a little about light, because light is not explicitly given in the definition of indoor environment quality definition as it is in the EPBD right now. It's a things such as thermal temperature, etc., but is no longer explicitly talking about lighting and acoustic. Why would it be important to include it in future directive? And yeah, why would it be important, and what could be done on this subject?
It's a lot, Valérie. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to then talk about what I was mentioning before. It's the coolest part of this story, which is the fact that lighting is not only fundamental for site safety and orientation, but has a fundamental impact on our body and on our moods. When it comes to the body, as mentioned by our keynote, and I will call it Pawel now, if you allow me, our keynote indeed mentioned the fact that lighting is the most important driver for our internal clock, our circadian rhythm. And when the circadian rhythm gets disrupted, this has a major consequences on our health. Our sleeping pattern are disturbed. You do not have good sleeping at night. It means your day is also awful because you feel bad. You don't feel energized at all. Instead, with a good rhythm, everything is much better indeed. And by the way, you need to expose yourself to at least 20 minutes of outdoor lights. So you have to really go out and expose yourself at least 20 minutes every single day to make sure that your rhythm is well established. But indeed, if you don't get that and you are exposed to very bad lighting the rest of the day, you need good lighting to compensate that and to mimic that. Your performance will be affected. Imagine you have a special task. I mean, you have to read, you have to type, you have to move a machinery. You need the right light, the right amount of light. This has an impact on how you perform. Your performance is. And if you have bad lighting on the other side, think about it. A flickering lamp on top of your desk. Imagine this. Will get you crazy, isn't it? Not only just you're not performing well, it will really have an impact on your health. And then this is about performance, but think about your mood. If you have a very good night, you will wake up full of energy and you are ready to get into the day. And if this is not happening, it's very close to that, if I can say that. And indeed, so this is what makes your life, this is well-being really. On the other side, very bad lighting, when instead you need a good boost of light, means that you will feel maybe depressed, isn't it? So with good lighting, you don't need a lot of coffee. 1 coffee in the morning, it's enough. You don't need a lot of bonbon or candies because you can feel energized and your mood can be really boosted. So apart jokes apart, lighting can really play a fundamental. That's why it should not be forgotten. Of course, it's easy in the definition, but should be then explicitly mentioned when it comes to the implementation at national level. But just to be aware of the fact that good lighting is not so easy, of course. Like other technologies that being discussed today, it's application specific. So then you need, for example, for a hospital, in different areas of a hospital, you need different lighting. When you're a school or the workplace or at the office, you have different needs indeed. So this has to be taken into account, but the technology is there. It's the same technology that can enable energy savings, will enable the right light of the right place. We have sensors, we have adjustable controls, the technology is there.
Thank you. Yeah, lighting is just like every other parameter, right? It's also dependent on who needs it, even for health. I mean, for a kindergarten, you may not have the same requirement as for a retired people's house or something.
Yeah, and I want to add, I mean, of course, the light is probably, seems to me, Elena, this easiest to control and is very well developed. But of course, improper light will create a stress, and that will affect all other our responses to all other parameters. And we expect that there is a very strong connection between all of that. So, of course, the light should not be considered separately from all other parameters. Today, we don't know the interactions that well, do not know the interaction between all those parameters. And I think this is why none of them should be compromised, meaning that good light, good acoustic environment, good thermal environment, and great quality. All of them, they need to be met because avoiding only one can affect the others.
Thank you. I would like also to go to monitoring. The new EPBD now requires monitoring of indoor environment quality. What should be the indicator? What should be monitored according to the directive? Or is it something to be further explained somewhere else?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
It's exactly
okay.
what I'm
Yeah, right.
And if I can have it before the end of June.
The end of June, yeah, okay. I think we can all agree on that by the end of this meeting, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
What is measured today is CO2, temperature, relative humidity, maybe sort of, I don't know, TVOC, which no one knows what it is actually, but one is measuring because it is there. And maybe some other parameters. I think in the framework, in the guideline for monitoring, we need to consider very well where to place the sensors. And I think this is a very important point that is very often overlooked. If you look at the sensors probably placed here in this room, they are, I don't know where they are actually, but maybe somewhere on the walls far away from us. And so this is this has to be, and then the maintenance of that, because the sensors may have to, we have to consider, you know, sort of a recalibration and check of the performance. So these two aspects should be added to the guideline, if I may comment. And then again, if the stakeholders here will provide the suggestions for the measurements, they should also suggest where to measure those parameters and suggest also how to maintain the sensors. Because it will help a lot the DG Energy to provide that guideline. There'll be benefit for everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Jelle would like to.
Yeah, I think it's very important again here to make some distinctions because including monitoring is crucial. Because if you don't know what is going on, basically you're just throwing things at the wall. But it's very important to differentiate between monitoring for assessments, so to check if the goals have been met, and monitoring that is used for control. And those are not necessarily the same. I think you'll want to use different parameters, different sensors, different types of measurements in terms of time that you're measuring, in terms of quality of the measurement and so forth, for assessment procedures and for monitoring. Maybe you're better suited to add to that, but the sensor that is used to trigger the functioning of the HVAC systems often has different requirements than a sensor that needs to tell you what the actual result, for example, in terms of health or risk to mold growth and things like that is you can have a much more, I would say, cheaper, but lower quality sensor that still gives you good control. And the control also requires a good understanding of everything that happens in the room. It's one thing to measure something. Let's take the example Pawel mentioned that many sensors are being developed very rapidly. One type of sensor that has become very popular is a PM sensor. It's very cheap now, but it's not that straightforward to have a PM sensor in space and know what to do with it in terms of control. It's much easier if you have a CO2 sensor. You know that there's a relatively direct correlation between CO2 concentration and ventilation rate in space, and it gives you an easy control action. If you have a PM sensor and it gives you a spike, it's much more difficult than understand what you need to do to manage it. So, yeah, just wanted to say.
Yeah. It raises three different things. The performance indicator you will develop for the design phase. Maybe you will make only simulation for that to reach that. The design indicator for the assessment phase, and the performance indicator for the assessment phase, and the performance indicator for the control system. Those are three different things that are linked together, but are very different in development. You want to put something?
Yeah. To add, I think some interesting sensors, like things to monitor that are very tied to like the phase of use, right? So acoustics, I think in Belgium, there's a requirement in bars to have to be able to measure their sound. And I think we do a lot of work with office buildings. And so their occupancy is this particular office meeting room currently being used is an important like stat for automation control systems. And then as well, booking, as in a lot of our systems are tied into the corporate booking system. So knowing not that there's somebody now, but that there will be somebody here soon because the room has been booked. But I think obviously a sort of important aspect is it's one thing to measure then what you do with those. Some of those, like it's important they're visible to the building occupants. It's important that it's visible to the building managers. It's important that that whatever data is being gathered makes its way back to the building automation control system, which is then able to sort of adapt, integrate with HVAC systems, with the shutters, with whatever, in order to adapt the environment. And as well, sometimes there might be notifications, real-time alert systems that are used in order to inform the right person. This is out of whack. Something is up. Something needs to be done here.
Thank you. And you're taking the microphone, that's good, because I also wanted to ask you what is done. Maybe some people outside of Europe has already solved all this problem about indicator, performance indicator. So what is it done outside the US?
Probably not. No. One of the things I would say, one good thing about the human body is we breathe through here, we see through here, and we eat through here. So from an environmental quality point of view, we stuck sensors to our face, that would be great. Unfortunately, there's no power there, and there's no control wiring. Unfortunately, that's over the wall. So that's a big consideration when selecting sensors. Is if they're all combined into one sensor, is it in the right place when it's there? You don't generally want them right by the windows or where the ventilation is. So one particular challenge. Another thing with monitoring is there's a push towards battery-powered sensors to save energy. They are only taking snippets of information in the course every, say, 5 minutes. That's no good for control. You should be just shooting all over the place in terms of those. In terms of standards internationally, a lot of these have been driven by commercial interests. A lot of them started in commercial offices, and it goes back to it was the US Green Building Council, where 1% of your buildings is energy use, the rest is staff cost. If you can make your employees more productive by providing a good environmental quality, then you make money out of it. So therefore, you should pay more money for the building that has good environmental quality. That was the reasoning behind it. But if you think about other buildings, and I stayed in London last night before I came over here. If I could choose my hotel based on its indoor environmental quality, and I could see what the exact room I was booking, like I lucked out last night. It had air conditioning. It was set to 18, perfect for me. That's looking for everyone. And maybe we would have chosen 16. Yeah. It faced west, but it had perfect blackout curtains. The only thing was acoustically, it was right next to the main road and the sirens went all night, but I didn't manage to sleep through it. But there is money tied to indoor environmental policy. There's a lot more studies coming out about how air quality affects people's health. It's particularly bad for young people and also the elderly. If you were choosing someone's care home based on the indoor environmental quality, then perhaps that would drive your decision and you go for it. Better score, more stars. So, yeah, internationally, it's up to this point been driven by money in the absence of standards.
Hey, thank you very much.
Sorry,
What-
just a brief
yeah,
comment.
sure.
I remember when I was working in the UK, we had BB 101. I don't know what's happening now.
BB 101 is still BB 101.
It's still BB 101.
Probably will be forever.
That was a very it was difficult to implement.
Yeah.
I mean, like designing of the building according to a standard was not easy, but it had very clear criteria, it had very clear means of demonstrating. So that would be more to look at.
Into that, yeah. So that's still being deployed. I was at a school last week, and the designed the latest version of BB 101, and they've written the temperature record that they hit in the classroom on board. We managed to hit 29 degrees. And part of it was they'd added a hot tin roof just outside, and there was a playground, so it was much hotter than it should have been according to the design. But I had to explain to him that 29 degrees is probably okay for BB 101. That is within the design criteria if it had been like during a heat wave. And unfortunately, with adaptive thermal comfort, your building is designed to that, it is going to get hot. So the follow-up to that is we are going to provide them with CO2 temperature humidity sensors for all of the classrooms, and they're going to try operating them differently to see that they all face the same direction, all got the same number of kids and adults in, and we're going to see what variation of opening the blinds when they open windows, when they close them, gives them the best results, because the user involvement is very important for the way people feel about the space. But so many buildings are designed assuming someone will open the window before it gets hot, rather than once it gets hot. Mm-hmm. And you know the analogy of the hall frog in the boiling water. People don't do it, and they're not necessarily told how their buildings operate.
But if I may just add a few recommendations for the implementation of the EPBD at national level, that would be just very quick. We were mentioning indeed standards that are relevant. Indeed, we have as well for lighting. So what I would recommend to policymakers for the implementation, first of all, to clearly mention the different parameters that make IEQ. So of course, lighting has to play a role. When it comes to standards, we have a very good standard when it comes to workplaces. So this is the EN 12464-1. Of course, I will send you that this will, of course, go by email. And the other point is that it is fundamental that we create opportunities of trainings and education for the building owners in particular, to the benefits of the different technologies for the well-being of people inside a building. These are three key points.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have a few minutes left, so I propose we take question from the audience, and your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Thank you. Timo Velpinen from Arctic Construction Cluster Finland. So actually, all the topics which were in my mind are already discussed, but anyhow. So in Finland, in office buildings, 90% of the building costs are labor costs, 10% other costs. So from this 10%, 30% is energy cost. So it means 30% from 10, it's 3%. So if we say 20% of energy is 0.6% of the total costs, but if we decrease by wrong measures and decisions the indoor air quality. So we will lose from that 90% much more. And that's why the monitoring is very important. So in the future, I think that we must pay more attention to these owner's project requirements, that in pre-design and design phase, we set more precisely the monitoring than, as mentioned, than before, that we could monitor and verify the performance during the whole life cycle of the building, because we have no technological and technical obstacles for that because of the new sensor technology. So the payback time of monitoring is from 0.5 to 2 years, which is very, very short. So that's why we need more guidelines and instructions for monitoring-based commissioning, which is so, as we say, what cannot be measured cannot be managed.
I think that was more comments than a question, right?
The question was that we should have more, also the comment, but in the future we must have better instructions and guidelines for the monitoring.
Thank you very much, Christina from Western. Well, I have a question for you. You mentioned, and thank you for the very good explanation for the collaboration. The national energy and climate, how they are important now. They are not only something different. So now I have more teeth because member states have to report back on what they do. And you also said this is a directive, so take it with a grain of salt. It needs implementation at national level. Can you provide a bit more color on how the national energy will help the implementation of the EPBD?
Right. On there is perhaps a differentiation that I should make. There is the national energy and climate plans, which cover all sectors, energy sectors and climate sectors at national level. Then there is the national building renovation plans, which cover only the building sector. So there are two aspects to this. First of all, the national building renovation plans, they have to provide a clear analysis on building stock, how the member state is going to improve it, so which measures they have in place. So how many buildings need to be renovated, which categories, which distribution they have, etc. Which measure they're going to use. For example, they will need to explain how they are going to address minimum energy standards for buildings, how they're going to address the trajectory, etc. How they will comply with all the elements. There is a very long list of indicators that they have to provide. So that is already an improvement on the current long-term renovation strategy. It's much more detailed and much more action-oriented. So they really have to say, I'm going to do this. Particularly, they have to say that about planning. So how mobilize the finance, not just the public finance, but also private finance. Then there's the second aspect to in terms of improvement of the national plans, which is that it's not just a one-off. Then it's a bigger strategy. That's what we should do in the next 10, 15 years. Instead, they have to review them every so often. Every time they review the national energy climate plans, and member states have to communicate to the Commission, this was my plan, this is the current stages of the indicators, they analyze that, we can make recommendations. Member states, they can follow. That's up to them. It's still a directive at the end of the year. So it's a much better, much more detailed plan, better indicators to follow up, because for us, the element of following up, being able to monitor what member states are doing. At the end of the day, we set policies at EU level, and we can only achieve them when all the member states do their job. I mean, it's not just that we're chasing them because that's what's in the directive. So this That's really what's gonna happen. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time now. So what should we stop now, or you want to get question from?
Maybe there was a question from
Jaap.
Short and simple question. Of course, we asked the member states finally to address an indoor environmental quality indicator for several indicators. Does it help? I know you are in a hurry because you have to write the guidelines in 1 year time. But does it help if you see some ideas that are currently developed in different working groups in CEN to update the standard that is mentioned in the Annex 1 to address this? So to address what sort of indicator could be of help, because do you want 4 indicators, for example, like we know from the presentation? Well, or some people say, well, we want only 1 indicator because we have 1 indicator for energy, so we don't want to have 1 indicator. Are there ideas in the member states to advise us how to proceed in developing further the general approach of such a standard?
Sorry, now.
Yeah, sure. It's okay. A little bit of management expectations, which I think is important. So we have to provide guidance for the whole of the. Most likely, there's going to be a very short guidance on fossil fuels. So that's going to be like a 2-page kind of thing. Not like that, but it's going to be very, very short. Then there's going to be 2 documents that are going to address most of the. We cannot make them too long. So to put it into perspective, we cannot make a 500-page document. That wouldn't work. Whatever we put in the recommendations has to be very short and to the point. Imagine that for something like technical building systems, we are going to have, by way of example, 20 to 30 pages maximum, which gives me about a couple of pages, 2-3 pages for indoor environmental quality. That's as much space as I have to tell member states this is what we could do. So that's, I very much agree with what you said, like 2, 3, 4, 5 indicators. These are the things you need to take into consideration. And then what we can do is, for example, you mentioned the issue of member states need to take into consideration the installation, the position and installation. Fine, I can direct them to a good manual. I can direct them to a good standard if need be. Like that I can absolutely do. But we need to provide the key elements. This is what you need. This is what everything you need to put in the legislation. This is where you can find the rest. And then if there is an argument, or member states say, no, I don't like this, technically they can. I mean, it's a directive, meaning they can go their own way if they think so. However, if we think that this is really not an experience, then
I just want to remind all the stakeholders that Article 13 now, it was before 11, and then there was a list of suggested indicators. That would be a good start to go back and look what should be added and what should be removed. This maybe that would be a way how to bring it back now in the guide, basically as a guideline.
Okay, I think that would be the closing comments.
I think there's a lot of places where there will end up being indirect benefits or like converging benefits. So, for example, mentioned the guidance on boilers. We are phasing out like fossil fuel boilers. That is less combustion inside buildings. But that in itself is going to improve like indoor environmental quality, for instance, air quality, right? Because it's about 10% asthma that is caused by gas being burned inside people's homes. And then the smart readiness indicator, which is one that has been going for a long time, perhaps frustratingly slow. First suggested as something that they could be testing in the 2018 version, and which we're now moving to end of the test phase, the last update before it was deployed, and then 2027 it'll be mandatory for large non-residential buildings. That includes a breakdown of goals to achieve per technical domain. It includes heating, includes ventilation, it includes lighting, yes, it includes lighting, ecology. For each of those, it gives convenience, comfort, health, flexibility. And I think that that means that we can probably squeeze a lot out of those 30 pages by looking at those sort of overlapping benefits, sort of allowing them to play out.
Sorry, just to comment that the 20-30 pages was an order of magnitude. It doesn't mean that it's going to be like that. But if I make one final comment, sorry. We've talked a lot about the guidance. I mentioned before the cost obstacle methodology. There's a delegated act that is going to deploy the new cost obstacle methodology. That one is quite important because it's what sets the minimum energy performance requirements. And that will start taking into consideration the public scientists. That's going to public consultations. You can have a look and see if you have any comments, because the guidance is very nice and attractive. It's very sexy. It goes directly to member states. The cost of the methodology, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's still very important. So don't forget about that.
Super. Super. Thank you very much. Please don't leave the room. For the participants online, if you just want to hear a bit about the technicalities of this room, please stay a bit online with us. Then we will gradually go to the coffee break, which is on the 7th floor in the building on the rooftop, it's called. But we have a colleague, Matisse, coming from the management of the building that will share with you why they invested in IEQ in this building, because I think you have seen that it's much more developed than the business as usual buildings in Brussels. And we particularly selected this building because of this, because in most of the IEQ events, can I see a raise of hands in how many buildings you've had events on IEQ and the building was the opposite, as it should be? Yeah, so this is what we wanted to overcome with this event, hence why we are here. So we arranged this as a transition to the coffee place. But please, to the participants online, if you want to hear at least what's happening in this room in terms of building services, you can stay a bit online. We will be back at, I would say, 4:40, because we are a bit running 10 minutes late and we still want to keep the networking time. So before I pass the floor to Matisse, I really want to convey my sincere gratitude for all the panelists and speakers and for Valérie for having smoothly taken us through this session timely. So a big round of applause. And now I'll pass the floor to Matisse, and for the people online, we'll be back approximately 4:40 Central European Summer. Thank you. Matisse, the floor is yours.
Is Mike here? There is.
Yes.
Okay. So hi everyone. I'm Matisse. I work there as the general manager of the building. So I need to take care about this big baby. As you saw it, we have a very particular installation with like a heater, because Comet at the beginning was it's a French company. We have already have like nine places like this one in Paris. We opened this one 3 years ago. We opened a new one in Madrid also last year. So they had time to improve the kind of building they wanted to open in Paris first. And then when they arrived in Brussels, they wanted to do their best as possible to have an open space, very brightly, like this room, for example. And all the building is around this kind of feeling, to be well seated when you come for a meeting, for a conference, or you want to be as cool as possible and don't think about anything else than what you will talk about. So that's why they tried, because I wasn't there for the opening, so I would say they wanted to create this kind of space, really cool to live in. Most of you are engineers, yeah? So I think you understand how it works upstairs. We have a different system here, and we wanted to create this system to meet in a very good condition. Okay, not only for environmental think about, but as for example, the windows, they are very it's a double window. Sorry for my English, I don't know how the term.
Double glazing is.
Double glass? Yeah, double glasses. It's not only because of the temperature condition, but only also for the sound, because you use microphone. There is another room there, another one there. So we don't want also to hear neighbors. So that's why we think about it. And all the heater system, the cooler system, the ventilation system, they wanted to create a cool atmosphere, and we try to be as environmental friendly as possible. So, for example, we every night we have automatic system of windows on three sides of the building. On each floor, we have automatic window open during the night to refresh all the air of the building. That's why also you have the tube on the back in all the room to make this exchange of air in all the building. So, like for example, we have one this side, another one on this side of the building, and another one on the other side. To have, for all the wind condition, we have a good air refreshing system, naturally. We also reuse the air. We don't put all the air out when we don't need it anymore. We keep a part of it, and it's all automatic. We use a Desigo system of Siemens, I don't know if you know it, to manage all the building, from the heater to the lights to the everything in the building from a laptop downstairs. So it's a good way to work, I think, and we decided to do it to have the best condition as possible for a client to come in this building. So I can show you also the different system in the common area, and we have another one on the rooftop also. It's the same for every room you can find. We have this kind of ventilation here, and heater and a cooler. On each room next to the door, you have a little control panel for clients, so they can use it easiest as possible. It's easy to play with. You can adjust the temperature -2 to +2, so they cannot put a heater maximum or do what they want to do. They can just control the room as simply as possible. And it's all automatic also. The room temperature was controlled in the beginning in this room automatically. It depends also on the amount of people in the room, so it adjusts automatically the temperature. And try to be as quiet as possible also, because you don't need to hear the ventilation system when you have a meeting. So that's why we can maybe go to see another room, because if you have a question.
Can I just ask? Thank you. Can I just ask you a question? I see beautiful LED luminaires. Do you have sensors, controls?
Yes, I can adjust the luminosity of the building. Yes, it's from the control. We can adjust from 0% to 100%, but most of the time we can also segment the room. We can just switch on the light on the side, or if we want to switch off the light in front of the screen, we can also do it. It depends on the size of the room. So little room, say, like just one choice, but bigger is the room, bigger you can have different settings. The goal is to be as polyvalent as possible, so clients can do what they want to do in a very good condition. And also for the light, and also for the technical system, we have microphone in some rooms, some cameras already, and sound system, everything. We try also to, but we shut it down every day. So we keep energy also. All the video projectors are shut down every night. We close all the windows because it's automatic during the night, refreshing air. We shut down all the lights, and also in the common area, we don't have anything else except for the Comet logo in front of the building. But it's LED, so it's So maybe we can go upstairs, and you can see on the top, if you heads up of the system. If you have any other question, I can try to answer. And I will show you the rooftop with a really nice view.
Thank you very much, Matisse. So everybody, this is the transition moment to the networking coffee break. And I say again to the people that still stayed with us for these technical details given by Matisse that we will be back at 4:40. So 40 minutes past 4 o'clock Central European summertime. Thank you for your patience and sorry you couldn't be with us. Maybe next time. So we'll be back in a bit less than 1 hour. Thank you. Bye.